Yo, what's going on, snipers, and welcome back to our finale of our Throwback 2009 franchise mode with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So, if you did not catch last episode, you might want to watch it, but unfortunately, our team just missed the playoffs by the skin of our teeth. It was kind of like a back and forth season where we had some great stretches and some bad stretches, but we only missed out by a couple points, which was really not great. Because we did win our last game of the season in overtime. We actually went in and watched that game because obviously it could have dictated if we made the playoffs or not. And then we had to rely on Buffalo losing the last game of the season, and they unfortunately won. So they end up getting into the playoffs with 93 points, and we missed out with 91 points. So it was a really close season for us, all things considered. Still a fun season. We did bring in Tobias Enstrom to try and help out our team offensively, and it didn't really do enough. But you could see we were that close to getting into the playoffs, but we literally just missed out on it because technically we would have had more ROW than all these three teams here, as you could see. But unfortunately, we just could not get those extra 2 points that matter so much in the standings. But it was still a fun season nonetheless. So there is that. And before we get into this final episode where we're going to basically be going over the final season awards, we're going to be looking through every team's record book as well, even though it's only been 3-4 seasons at this point. We're also going to take a look at every team's NHL lines as well at the moment to see basically how the teams have changed over the last few years and that sort of thing. So we could kind of wrap up this series in a way, even though it's been only 13 episodes. So it's probably been my shortest series I've ever done. But anyways, I do have a few comments to go over. So the first one is from Jared the Rabbit, who says, "Nice goal. Too bad it didn't mean anything. Also, I can't wait to edit your 1999-2000 roster when the time comes." And yeah, I'm very excited for the 1999-2000 roster that I will be doing. Because obviously it's going to have a lot more depth to it, but I also plan to, like I mentioned, I think in my channel update, I plan to do a full series with that 99-2000 roster because I don't think my Jet series or one of my series will go as long as these prior series, just because I want to do a full throwback one, because it seems like the last few years that I've been doing throwback rosters, I've only been able to do a short series with my throwback rosters because the other ones take up a lot of time. Well, this year I definitely want to try and see if I could get a full series in on a throwback, because obviously that would be a lot of fun, because I had a lot of fun with this series even though it was a very short-term one. And the last comment is from Saturn Otaku, who says, "Rough way to close out the series. This was indeed a very weird universe in terms of the simulation as a whole. I bet given a few more seasons, you could have had this team as a contender. Oh well, on to NHL 24. And yeah, I think if we would have had a few more seasons, we could have probably turned this team into being a pretty good team, because this is what our team looked like based on paper in this last season. You can see we had a pretty solid top six. If Tarnstrom would start growing, he definitely could have helped this team into the playoffs. The only problems I'd say with this team is the regression from guys like Martin St. Louis, Vakov Prospel, but in general, this team was coming together quite nicely, especially on the defensive front. This is a pretty nice top four with the addition of Enstrom, who would have been signed for another year, but he obviously won't get to play another season since we do not have another season of this. And our goaltending combination is not bad either. I mean, Heavy Bullen would retire probably at the end of the season likely, but Yaroslav Halak could be a starter that we'd be able to keep here for a few years at least. And yeah, we had some okay depth as well. So I definitely think this team could have been a team that won a Stanley Cup in the next 5+ seasons, depending on how Turnstrom developed and all that type of thing, because we only got to see one season out of this guy, but he had 21 goals in his rookie season, so no slouch, I'd say. I think he could easily become a 40-goal scorer, considering he's got the good shot. If the offensive awareness would climb up there, I definitely could see him being a good offensive guy. And then Stamkos started to finally find his game a little bit. You could see he had 25 goals this year, so he might be finally on pace to becoming that type of player that he is in real life. We would never know, but if we were to go longer than this, I could see him getting into 30+ goal range for sure. But anyways, that is that. Let's take a look at every team's lines before the season ends, because I am very curious on what teams are looking like basically going into the lockout shortened season, which would have been 12-13. This is technically 2011-12. So let's take a look at every single team and see if they've added any new pieces. So here's the Anaheim Ducks in this season. So they still have a lot of familiar faces. They did bring in Ryan Kessler in this universe, which is pretty dope. So I do like that. They also drafted Tyler Seguin, so that's kind of neat. Didn't really have a lot of points in his first season, but that's kind of realistic to real life, because I'm pretty sure he didn't do much with the Boston Bruins. They also brought in like Radek Bonk, Chris Kelly, a couple former Sens. But, and they also brought back Sammy Paulson, actually. Yeah, Sammy Paulson didn't even start in Anaheim in the series. He started in Chicago. So they brought back Paulson to kind of retire with the team. That's kind of a neat roster in a sense. Yeah, I don't mind it. Surprised they didn't make the playoffs. It's probably because they have a lot of kind of grit players like Carter, Peros, and Brown still. I don't know. Defensively, they brought in Tom Gilbert. Okay, Steve Eminger as well, who I feel like he played with the Ducks at one point, but I honestly can't remember. They also brought in Cole Yakovo and Thomas Pock. And then goalie-wise, oh yeah, they brought in Roberto Luongo. Because I remember people mentioning like it's kind of weird that he's in Anaheim now. And he had his worst season yet in his franchise mode, but he's still been a pretty solid regular season goalie. Playoff-wise, on the other hand, yikes, that's not very good. Not very good at all. And Curtis Sanford is his backup, so the guy that used to play as his backup in Vancouver for a little bit, that's kind of neat. And in depth-wise, Philippe Boucher is there at 39 years old, and Ryan Malone, who we traded to them, is currently injured at the moment. He did really well this season with Anaheim. 67 points and a plus 25. If we would have held on to Malone, would have we made the playoffs? That's the question I have for you guys. Kind of curious on that. Let's take a look at some of these other teams here. Atlanta drafted Kuznetsov. They also brought in Doug Weight and Rick Nash, which is really weird. So the Atlanta Thrashers started spending some money. I'm pretty sure they had Reasoner day one, right? Yeah, okay, I thought so. Had to double check because I know he did play for Atlanta in real life. Chris Kreider was also drafted by them. Still taking a bit of time to develop, but he had 17 goals this year. They also drafted this guy. 16th overall. Was actually drafted by the Flames. Huh. In first year. Interesting. And then Stefan Veilleux. So a little bit of changes for the Atlanta Thrashers. Kind of nice when they have Kovalchuk and Nash as your top two left wingers. And kind of weird that Colby Armstrong jumped up to an 89. He must have had a good season last year. Yeah, 77 points. Probably because he was playing with Kovalchuk, my guess. Defensively, you got Scott Hannon who went there, and Steve Montador. Sergei Gonchar was there for his last season, so you can see they brought in quite a bit of good free agent players. And also a guy that they drafted in the second round in 2024. In Valentenko. Goaltending-wise, that's not great. I could see why they kind of struggled in a bit in terms of goaltending. Eric Erzberg as a starter doesn't make sense, and Leonard's not even ready to be a backup. And then they have Marek Shatan, who's somebody they drafted, and some guy named Ninima. Okay. Yeah, it's not bad. Boston drafting really well. Well, actually, Wheeler just starts developing really well, apparently. And, of course, Bergeron does as well. David Krejci is a second-line center. They brought in Steve Bernier. They're still holding on to Phil Kessel after all these years. Jeff Halpern's there now. Our former guy. He's dropped off a lot, too. But he still had a good year there. And they also have McCormick. That had a little bit of grit. McCormick and Barch is a very physical part of the third line. Jeez. These two guys used to take a good amount of penalty minutes. They also have Redis Evenons. Okay, that's a very physical Bruins team. These three guys, and then you add also Milan Lucic into the top six. That's kind of crazy. And then Pruka's their fourth line center and some guy they drafted, I guess. Defensively, they brought in Dan Hamhuis. So he was on the other side of the Vancouver Cup win, I guess, or Vancouver Finals, not Vancouver Cup win, but Vancouver Finals in 2011, technically. Victor Hedman starting to develop really well for them, up to an 85 overall at 21. Pretty solid numbers, not the greatest yet, but should start helping out offensively soon. And they also had Matt Walker. And Rask is now the starter there, and Vesatoskal is the backup, okay. Depth-wise, they have Matt Sundin as a scratch at 41 years old. Okay. Never thought I'd see Matt Sundin as a Boston Bruin, but here we are. We head to the Buffalo Sabres. They brought in Mike Knuble. They also brought in Kyle Wellwood. Rafi Torres wasn't there at the beginning, but he was a Buffalo Sabre at one point IRL. That's pretty much all they brought in this. I don't really know why they have Wellwood and Gostad like kind of swapped. Both of them are really good face-off men, but you should honestly probably play Gostad as the fourth line center, in my opinion. Defensively, looks like they drafted a guy pretty high up, a generated guy who's turned out to be pretty solid here early on. They also have Ferentz and Duncan Keith as a second pairing defender. It's kind of weird. They also drafted Cam Fowler, I guess, and they have some 58 overall. Okay. And yeah, Jonas Enroth and Miller still. And that's that. We head to the Carolina Hurricanes. They brought in Vladimir Tarasenko via the draft. He had not the best start to his career in his first year, but he's starting to break out quite a bit, it looks like, which is good. Second line-wise, they didn't add anybody except for Andrew Ladd, who came back to Carolina, so that's kind of neat. I don't know how he got up to an 88 overall. He's starting to assimilate really good, so that's kind of interesting. So kind of neat to see him going to a former team. Third line-wise, Cole Sutter, Joel Ward. So they brought in Joel Ward. They also brought in Mike Rupp and Daryl Powell, so a little bit of grit on that bottom six. And then defensively, they brought in Stefan Robida and Chris Phillips from the Sens, which is a bit weird. Andrew Alberts is there, which I'm pretty sure he was in Carolina at one point, and Brett Lebda also was brought in. Goalie-wise, they brought in Jonas Hiller as their starter and Dan Ellis, so that would have been the goaltending combination for the Anaheim Ducks in 2010-11, I think, which is kind of neat. And then depth-wise, they have Frogren and Charnquist. So they brought in a lot of defenders, it seems like. Columbus brought in Justin Williams. They also brought in Martin Havlat, so some good top six guys. They already had Umberger, I think, to start this, right? Yeah, thought so. They brought in Tyler Arneson as well and Mason Raymond. Yeah, not bad. They also brought in Crab, Betts, and Rutu. And then Fedoruk they brought in, and Mike Greer. So they had a lot of grit to that bottom six. Defensively, who did they bring in? Nobody. This is all guys that they would have had at the beginning. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I had to double check that Commodore was there at the beginning. And Thomas Greiss was brought in as the backup option. And Huselius is still there, but he's injured. Ryan Beta there. And some guy that they drafted as well. A lot of these guys that they drafted in year one have developed really well fast enough, these defenders. Like, this Kostopoulos guy is already a top 6 defender. Calgary drafted Johnny Gaudreau in this universe, which is awesome. Kind of neat to see a different universe with Gaudreau playing with Joe McGinley. Considering they didn't do that in real life, I'm pretty sure. They also brought in Jason Williams and Todd White. Max Talbot as well. Boyd Gordon. Craig Adams is there as a 68. Damn, he dropped off a cliff. What the heck? How did he drop off that much? I thought I made him like a 76. He dropped down to a 68 overall at 34. Wow, that's some rapid drop-off. They also have Jeff Skinner, who they drafted, so that's interesting. Defensively, I don't remember if Sarge was there. Yeah, he was, okay. Had to double check. They had Erskine, Dennis Seidenberg, and some guy they drafted. Goalie-wise, Kiprusoff is still there as a 78. And then they have Ilya Brzgalov as their starter now. And some guy named Marshall Bureau, which made me think of Mark Bureau because of my 99-2000 build. If you know who Mark Bureau is, shout out to you. But Chicago, this team had not made the playoffs in this franchise mode, which is really weird. But they must... Oh, it's because Taze is still kind of an RFA. He held out the entire year because of the money. But they did draft this guy who's really good, apparently. Smith Pelly. They also do have Richard Zednik and Steve Sullivan. Patrick Eaves is there now. Same with Anthony Stewart. And Miroslav Shatane at 38 years old. Goddamn. Defensively, they brought in Ian White. They drafted Dougie Hamilton. They still have Cam Barker, which is hilarious. Brett Hedican and Brett Clark. So the Bretts on the pairing. And goalie-wise, it's still the same. And Jonathan Taze is actually injured, so he missed an entire season because of RFA status, but he was actually back this year, but he got injured and he was doing really well. Interesting. So they might actually make the playoffs this year. I don't know if they did or not. I don't remember. We'll definitely take a look at the awards in this episode too. Colorado brought in Matthew Lombardi and Michael Ryder. Todd Bertuzzi as well. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, they drafted him. Same with Matt Duchene. And then we also have this Erkramps guy who they drafted 4th overall 2 years ago. Wolski's playing as the 4th line center. Damn, the center depth is insane on Colorado. That's nuts. They also brought in Corvo, Aaron Ward, Denny Gauthier, and some other guys they drafted. And goalie-wise, they have Andrei Pavlik at 24 years old. And they also have Peter Budaj still. And depth-wise, they have some guys they drafted. And Ryan Holwig. Dallas, what did you get? Oh, yeah, Nikita Kucherov, who we could have drafted first overall if we would have gotten that spot. But, yeah, he had a really good first season. Would have been definitely nice to have somebody like Kucherov, but oh well. They also have Ryan Shannon still, or they brought in Ryan Shannon, I should say. Thomas Fleischman, Camille Krebs, Gregory Campbell, and Dustin Penner, who cuts himself while cooking pancakes. Chris Campoli, Yoni Pikkinen, Anton Volchenkov. Yeah, this Dallas team has changed a lot. Kurt Sauer. Darcy Kemper's already a starter at 21, which is kind of nuts. And they also have Nina Mackey. And then they have Mikhail Samuelson. Yeah, they brought in a lot of pieces over the first few years. Detroit, so let's see. TJ Oshie at 26. That's an interesting pickup for them. TJ Oshie. Rich Peverly was brought in. Same with Andre Kostitsyn. Curtis Glencross. Petri Nokalainen. TJ Hensink. And some guy named Hobson. Defensively, they brought in Noah Welsh, our former defenseman. They also brought in Hal Gill, who's dropped off a cliff as well. I don't know why these guys are dropping off so hard, because I don't remember them doing that in prior roster builds. And they do still have Nabokov, and they also brought back Curtis Joseph. That's hilarious. Nabokov in Detroit is cool, and then Curtis Joseph being in Detroit is weird. At 44, I'm surprised he has not retired. He probably will retire this season, though, likely. Edmonton, what do we got here? They brought in Zach Parise, Jonathan Chichu. It's kind of neat. Taylor Hall they drafted in this. Manny Malhotra was brought in. Great third-line center there. And some other guys they drafted. Also brought in Klesla, Paul Mera, Andres Lilia. And goalie-wise, they're running Dubnik and Craig Anderson, our former backup goaltender. Didn't have a bad season here this year. Depth-wise, Nicholas Havlid at 39. A lot of these guys should have already retired, but they didn't. Florida has Chris Higgins, which I think he played there in real life for like a split bit. What else you got here? Cole League. They brought in Sergei Fedorov, who's still playing at 43. We also got Scott Hartnell, Ruslan Fedotenko, Eric Fair, Mark Stone, who they drafted, Jesse Winchester, who was there in real life too at one point, Bobby Holik. A lot of changes for the Florida Panthers, looks like. Francois Boschman's the only defensive change, I think. Yeah, I thought Nick Boynton was already there. Goalie-wise, Jason LaBarbera and Thomas Vokoun. Not the best 1-2 punch. I mean, Vokoun's dropping off a lot, but LaBarbera is an average backup. And they have JR still, but he's scratched. And Nathan Horton is scratched. Why are you scratching Nathan Horton? That's a bit weird. I don't know if it's because of injury precaution or what. The LA Kings drafted Jonathan Huberdeau. He's playing on the line with Kopitar and Simmons. Okay. Second line has Ryan O'Reilly, who they drafted. They brought in Semin. They also brought in Eric Christensen, Aaron Voros, our former guy Ryan Craig, and Matt Bradley. Defensively, don't think they have much changes except for Andrew Hutchinson and Ruslan Saleh. And goalie-wise, Antti Niemi was brought in as the backup behind Jonathan Quick, which is kind of neat. And then depth-wise, they have Mark Eaton, who's dropping off a lot too. Matt Smaby, our former defender, and Kyle Calder. We head to Minnesota. They brought in Owen Nolan, or was he there at the beginning? He was there at the beginning, okay. Never mind. Bill Guerin was brought in there, which is hilarious considering he's now isn't he the general manager of the friggin' Minnesota Wild? Yeah, he is. And he's now on them. Did I even notice that, or was that new? I must have noticed that last offseason. I don't think I would have missed something like that. Craig Conroy is there as well. Eric Belanger, who I think was already there at the beginning. Aaron Asham was brought in. Some random prospects. Paul Ranger, our former defender, is there now. And Sean O'Donnell. Goalie-wise, Mathieu Guérin is the backup behind Backstrom. Then you have Tony Lidman as the only other guy notable. Montreal, let's see what you got. Patrick O'Sullivan is your top line center. Okay. Radek Dvorak, Richard Park, some guy they drafted early on who's really good. The first overall pick in 2024. Gabriel Hillis. Paul Kariya is there at 38 with Jay McClement and some guy named Boris Voloshenko. Really good steal there in 2024. The first pick in the second round, the same year that they drafted Hillis. Colin Fraser is there at 28, and Lawton Dress is still there. They brought in Zelitsky and Peter Harold, Brian McCabe, Mark Giordano's there now, and Rob Scuderi. So a lot of changes for the Habs. And the backup to Carey Price is Jonathan Bernier, because of course Montreal likes their French players. They still have Kostitsyn and Carlos Grastins, who would have been tragically passed by now. So rest in peace to Carlos Grastins. New Jersey brought in Thomas Plekanec, so he left Montreal, went to the Devils. They also brought in Saku Koivu, okay. Another former Hab, of course. Keith Tkachuk was brought in as well. Ryan Jones, Jim Slater, Scott Walker, Jordan Tutu, Todd Marchand, and David Steckel, I think, as well. So a lot of changes to this Devils team as well. Zbigniew McCulloch, Kevin Bieksa, Roman Hammerlick, who we let go of in the offseason because we brought him in briefly. Was Salvador there at the beginning? He was, okay, I thought so. I had to double check though. And goalie-wise, Josh Harding is now the backup to Martin Brodeur, who should be retiring relatively soon. And depth-wise, they have Greg Zanin and Ben Guite, and Brian Rolston's currently injured. We head to the Nashville Predators, who have Antti Metnin, or Mietnin. What else we got here? Joe Pavelski, that's kind of weird seeing him in Nashville. Andy Hilbert was brought in. I don't know how Andy Hilbert got up to an 85 overall. That's some weird growth. John Mitchell. Tom Kostopoulos is down there as a 73. He dropped off a lot. Jason Arnott, still in Nashville. What else we got here? This is a terrible defensive core. Oh my goodness. This is uncharacteristic of Nashville because Nashville drafted some great defenders, obviously, in their time. And right now they just have Shea Weber because the rest of these guys are all 77 and below. God damn. And they don't really have the goaltending combination either. They do have some guy that they drafted in the first round 2 years ago already as a backup, which is kind of nuts. But Pecorine is the starter still, but he's only an 84 because he was a very late bloomer IRL. Depth-wise, they have just some random young defensemen again. The New York Islanders, one of the teams that probably made the most changes. They drafted John Tavares. They brought in Marian Hossa, which is kind of nuts. They also brought in Zherdev, Joffrey Lupul, Troy Brower, Eric Perrin, and some guy named Hector West. Defensively, Matt Carl, Derek Morris, Tim Gleason, Christian Ehrhoff, and they held on to Mark Streit, but they also brought in Alexei Semenov. Goalie-wise, Mike Smith is now there as a starter. Wasn't he in Columbus, though? I thought he signed with Columbus in the offseason. He must have went to the Islanders via trade in the offseason, too. But he had a pretty good season. And then Rick DiPietro is still there as the backup before he started making his crazy contract. Actually, no, it is during when he was making his crazy contract. I forgot about that. God damn. Oh, my. Imagine paying a backup goaltender a 10-year contract. And then you still have Mike Smith on a 5-year deal. Jeez. These two guys are making bank. God damn. That's crazy. New York Rangers brought in Hoodler and Langenbrunner. They also brought in... Was Sean Avery there at the beginning? I think so, right? Yeah, he was. Okay. Victor Kozlov was brought in. Sean Thornton's dropped off a cliff as well. I don't know why a lot of these guys are dropping off so fast. Like, these guys are enforcers, so that's probably why, but still. Or grinders, right? Yeah, grinders. Brad Richardson was brought in. Defensively, Mark Stewart was brought in. And I think that's it. Goalie-wise, Anton Khudobin was brought in as the backup behind Henrik Lundqvist, who's not simulating like Henrik Lundqvist. There's that. The Ottawa Senators brought in Ville Peltonen. Okay. And Stefan Yell, who's dropped off a lot too. He's from Ottawa, which is kind of neat. So that's kind of cool. Mike Motto was brought in. They drafted Tyson Barrie. But yeah, this defensive core is atrocious. All that is left from the original defensive core is Philip Kuba. And in goalie-wise, Brian Elliott and Jimmy Howard is the backup. That's a pretty solid 1-2 punch. And then Paul Martin. Okay, so they did bring in Paul Martin as well, but the defensive core without Paul Martin, because he's injured, is very, very bad. Philadelphia brought in Antropov. They also brought in Peter Sikora, Fanaganov, Gabriel Landeskog they drafted. Daniel Briere still there. They brought in Hordichuk and Brad Winchester. That's a pretty good looking team. They also have Eskalainen, who they drafted. Yeah, that's a really solid looking team. Defensively, they brought in Keith Yandel, which is hilarious since Keith Yandel obviously played with the Flyers IRL for a little bit, and he was very bad defensively, just like this. So I like that. I like that a lot. They also brought in, oh, that's not James Wisniewski. That's Jeremy, some guy that they drafted. That threw me through a loop. Goaltending-wise, they have Scott Clemenson and Martin Biron. And they have John Sim and some guy named Roosevelt as depth. We head to Phoenix. Slava Kozlov was brought in. Alex Kovalov was also brought in. Same with Pavel Dimitra. Mikkel Bodker is still there. Yuri Letnin. Toby Peterson was brought in. Yeah, they made a lot of changes as well. PJ Axelson. Michael Hanzu's back there. What else you got here? Jeff Fingers, a top 2 defenseman. Okay. Some guy they drafted. Christian Backman's there now. Garnet Exelby and Shane Morrison. And then goaltending-wise, Alex Alda's the starter, and Peter Mrazek is the backup. Yikes. Nick Leddy is scratched, and same with Victor Tikhonov. Pittsburgh. David Clarkson's getting to play with Sidney Crosby. That should not be allowed. That should not be allowed. What the hell? That is weird. Let's see. They brought in Taylor Pyatt, Ryan Johnson, Adam Bursch, Colton Orr. Brendan Shanahan is playing center, which makes no sense. And Travis Moen. Okay. Defensively, they brought in Sammy Salo. Our former defender, Joseph Malakar, went back to Pittsburgh, where he actually started his career. And Mike Komisarek. Goaltending-wise, they do still have Fleury, but Steve Valaket is the backup behind him. And depth-wise, they have Jansen, Jackman, and Enver Leeson. We head to San Jose, who's won a cup and also been to 2 cup finals in the series, so they should be pretty good. They have Ponikarovsky added to this team. They also brought in Dominic Moore as a replacement, I guess, for Pavelski. Chad LaRose is there. Thomas Kopecky, who was with us last year. Sean Bergenheim, Daniel Paille, Dean McCammond, and Freddie Sjustrom. Defensively, they have Dan Girardi, who they brought in. Interesting. Wow, 43 points this year. It's pretty good. They also brought in Randy Jones, Jonathan Erickson, and Jay McKee, who's dropped off a lot too. Why are these guys dropping off so rapidly quick? I don't feel like that's what I've seen in the past. Could be wrong. I also brought in Cam Ward as their starter and Jose Theodore as the backup. And Dan Boyle's currently injured, so they do still have Dan Boyle. But they also have Brian Southerby, Matt Cook, and Robert Nilsson. They have some pretty good depth. St. Louis. What did they bring in? Corey Stillman, who was with them in the earlier 2000s. Boyd Devereaux. What else we got here? Jamal Mayers they brought back. And that's that. Defensively, Josh Georges, Marc-Andre Bergeron, Jordan Leopold. And I think Mike Weaver was brought in, right? No, he was there at the beginning. Okay. And goaltending-wise, Marty Turco is the starter and Dwayne Rolston is the backup. Yikes, that's an old goaltending duo. They should look for a new goaltender at that rate. Toronto, what do you got? Svatos. They won a Stanley Cup in this series, so I can see why. Marek Svatos, Mark Savard, Alex Frolov. That's a pretty good second line. Jason Blake is still there, but he's dropped off a lot. Vernon Fiddler was brought in, and Nigel Dawes. Defensively, Barrett Jackman was brought in. That's a great addition. Same with Brent Seabrook. That's also a great addition. Still have Kabina and Strawman, but then they have Merrick Malik, who's dropped off a cliff. Yeah, let's see, why has Merrick Malik dropped off that much? He has dropped off a absolute cliff, because when we had him in year 1, I'm pretty sure I had him as like a 79 overall. But all of a sudden, he's now a 70 overall. Kind of weird. And Luke Shen is still there as well. Goaltending-wise, they have Corey Schneider and Ben Bishop. That's a solid 1-2 punch. And depth-wise, Brendan Witt has dropped off a lot. And same with Radek Martinek. We head to Vancouver. Daniel and Henrik Sedin are playing together with Rene Bourque. That's kind of neat. Upshaw, Brad Richards is there now. That's a great addition with Burroughs. Christoph Schubert, Brooks Laich, and Zach Sortini. And a fourth line of our former player Adam Hall with Mark Scheifele, who they drafted, and Eric Nystrom. Some of these teams are pretty cool. For sure. Bruno Gervais, who we traded to them to get, what was it? Was it Vananen? No, it wasn't. It was, oh, we traded him to Atlanta to get Enstrom. And then Atlanta immediately flipped him to Vancouver. So Bruno Gervais got to play with Edler. They had Chris Pronger as well last year. Matthew Schneider, Brendan Bell, Shane O'Brien still. And then goalie-wise, Jesse Gare. Tim Thomas is the weirdest one still. We saw that in the last episode. Yeah, going from Boston to Vancouver. I wonder how Tugi would feel about that. That's hilarious. And then OEL is their guy that they drafted, but he hasn't really played much apparently. Brett McLean there, and Daryl Sador. And then finally we head to the Washington Capitals, who have Sergei Samsonov, Fabian Brunstrom. Robert Lang is back in Washington. Same with Michael Pekka, who's now in Washington, I guess. Drew Miller was brought in. Same with Mika Zibanejad, Patrick Coletta. It's kind of neat seeing Drew Miller there, actually, because his cousins are Kip, Kevin, and what's the other guy's name? And Kelly Miller. And I believe 2 of the 3 of those Millers played with the Washington Capitals. So kind of a little neat shout there. Freddie Modine, John Madden, not the football guy, and Matt Penninger back in Washington after he left us, right? Yeah, it's kind of neat. Defensively, Ron Hainsey, Mike Green, Melanger Cena, and Matthias Oland, and then Podian Schultz. So this defensive core pretty much stayed the exact same except for these 2 guys, I think. Goalie-wise, Kari Lehtinen and Semyon Varlamov. That's a pretty solid 1-2 punch. And in depth-wise, they have Adam Mayer, Dan Fritsch, and Nathan Oystrick. So those are the teams' rosters in this final season. Now let's find out who wins the Stanley Cup in this final year. And then we'll look through like the record book briefly. And I think that'll be probably it at this point for this episode, for this last episode. Because I don't really want this episode being like an hour-long finale, but let's see who ends up winning the Stanley Cup. But first, let's take a look at this playoff tree. So the playoff tree for the last season, you have Vancouver versus Los Angeles, Phoenix versus St. Louis, Detroit and Columbus, Minnesota and Dallas for the West. Then in the East, you have Montreal, Buffalo. Montreal's the 1 seed, which is kind of weird. Pittsburgh and Ottawa, not a surprise. That was a matchup very common in this point in time. Washington and New York, and Toronto in the other New York. And in AHL-wise, you got Cleveland and Manitoba, so basically Lake Erie and Manitoba, I think. Chicago and Rockford. You also have Hamilton and Grand Rapids, Rochester and San Antonio, Hershey and Wilkes-Barre, Albany and Norfolk, Springfield and Binghamton, and Worcester, I should say, to be a Massachusetts guy, and Bridgeport. So who is going to win the Stanley Cup this year? Who is going to win it in 2011-12? The LA Kings are in the playoffs, so will the LA Kings be able to win the Stanley Cup? New Jersey did not make the playoffs this year, though, so we won't get the exact same Stanley Cup finals, but if LA wins the Cup here, that would be kind of nice, just so it could be actually a little bit more realistic than the Cup finals we've had in these first few years, because they've been kind of all over the place. So who is going to be the Stanley Cup champion in this last season? At least our AHL team's in the playoffs. Yeah, but they seem to be eliminated. Yup, and Phoenix has won the Stanley Cup. Geez, Phoenix has been a good team in this series, and Worcester wins the Calder Cup. Phoenix wins the Stanley Cup. They lost to Toronto a few years ago, I think. As this time around, they took out Washington in 6 games. Wow. They had knocked out the first seed as well on their route. So they went through St. Louis in 5. Went through Detroit. Actually, not Detroit. They went through... No, actually, it was Detroit. Yeah. Detroit in 6 games. Then they knocked out Vancouver in 7. And then they took out Washington in 6. So Alex Ovechkin just misses out on a Stanley Cup here. And then AHL-wise, Worcester ended up beating Rockford in the Calder Cup finals. Our Norfolk Admirals got all the way to the conference finals again, though, which is nice, but they lost. Let's take a look at those awards. So, yeah, Phoenix wins the Stanley Cup. The President's Trophy went to the Vancouver Canucks, and yeah, we already know who was in the Cup Finals. Ovechkin won the Art Ross this year and the Hart. Andrei Markov wins his second straight Norris Trophy. That's kind of neat. Zetterberg, the Lady Byng for the second consecutive season. Kucherov wins the Calder. Not a surprise. Peter Mueller won the Conn Smythe. That's a really weird one. Because Peter Miller had a lot of hype around him, and I guess he actually lived up to that in this series. Jay Shiger won the Vezina, okay, and the Jennings. Drew Doughty won the Masterton. Jack Adams went to the Ottawa's head coach, which at this point in time, 2012, trying to think of who was the actual coach at this point. I honestly can't remember. Bergeron won the Selke, so he breaks up Datsuk's streak, not a surprise. Alex Ovechkin wins the Ted Lindsay and also the Richard. AHL-wise, Jay Pandolfo apparently was an MVP in the AHL. Okay, a little bit weird there. James Reimer was the best goalie in the AHL. Rod Brindamore was the best player in the Calder Cup playoffs for the Worcester Sharks. Okay. Al Montoya was the best AHL goaltender. And that's pretty much it. Okay. Let me actually take a look at the stats from the Yotes in their cup win, because I am curious on that. So yeah, Dimitra and Mueller were really good. Kyle Turris was great as well, same as Shane Doan. They had some really good depth scoring, for sure. I could definitely see why they won on that depth scoring alone. So there is that. And goalie-wise, Alex Auld backstopping his team to a Stanley Cup. I was making fun of this goaltending combination a little bit ago, but it won them a Stanley Cup. So Peter Mrazek, a Stanley Cup champion. Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, so there is that. Now we got to take a look at the record book. And that'll be it for this final episode of the series. If there's anything you guys want to take a look at that I don't show in this episode, I could always, you could tweet me and I'll look back through this at some point and I could let you guys see certain things if I miss out on anything. But we'll just kind of skim through this a little bit more. But you can see Ryan Getzlaf was the best duck in the series. Not really a surprise though. Not really a surprise. Game record wise, Jonas Hiller made 46 saves in a game apparently. We head to Atlanta. Jay Shiger made 50 saves in a game. Damn. This is probably going to be Kovalchuk's record book, my guess. Not so much. Not so much. A little bit, but not as much as I was expecting. Boston, led by Bergeron mostly, it looks like, in Rask. How much saves did Rask make in the game? Oh, it was Tim Thomas this time. 45. Buffalo. Jonas Enroth has the record for most saves in a game, okay. It's kind of weird that it wipes the record book completely, so you won't have the actual Buffalo Sabres stats, but still I like it in that sense too. Because this is an alternate universe. Jason Pominville. Kind of surprised by that. Thought Thomas Vanek would be up there. Calgary, Jerome McGinley. Not really a surprise on that front. Let's see. Game record, Kiprusoff made 48 saves in a game. Mike Camilleri had a 7-point game in year one. That is kind of nuts. Goddamn. Carolina, Cam Ward made 47 saves in a game. Andrew Ladd. Eric Stahl, not really a surprise on that front. Most of these aren't really surprising. Patrick Kane up there. What else we got here? Cristobal Huey made 47 saves in a game. Okay. Colorado, 48 saves from James Reimer in a game, but he was in the AHL in this last season. That's kind of weird. Kind of weird. Who's up there for Colorado? Paul Stastny. Not a surprise based on how he started his career IRL. Columbus, Antoine Vermette. That's kind of reasonable considering he was one of their better players at this point. And since Rick Nash left the team, it makes sense too. Wade Dublowitz, the most saves in a game with 49. Dallas, Marty Turco made 45 saves in a game. Let's see. Mike Ribeiro. Okay. Reasonable as well. Henrik Zetterberg, not really a surprise for Detroit. What else we got here? Most saves in a game, 42 only from Jimmy Howard, so Detroit doesn't give up a lot of shots apparently. Edmonton, Devin Dubnyk, 43 saves. Who is going to be the point guy for them? Hemsky, as I was thinking. Florida, let me guess, it's going to be maybe, I don't know who's still there again. I would go with maybe like Stephen Weiss. Yep, Stephen Weiss, okay. I'm going to try and predict who would be the leader in points based on my knowledge. So Stephen Weiss on that front. Vokun made 48 saves in a game. We head to the Los Angeles Kings. Jonathan Quick with the most saves, 48 for him. Who do I think would be the LA Kings? Probably Kopitar or Dustin Brown. Yeah, Kopitar, 316 points for him. We head to Minnesota. Oh, I should have predicted. Obviously, it's Gaborik. Gaborik has been really good in this series. 380 points already. And he's already got 240 goals. Jeez. And Matthew Guerin, 46 saves in a game. Montreal, who do I think would be their best player? Probably Koivu if he wasn't on early on, which I think he was actually. So I don't really know for Montreal. Jaro Halak had the most saves in a game with 48. Now he's not on our team, so that's kind of nice. Rookie-wise, Kostitsyn, Colin Fraser, games played, not that that matters. Andrei Markov in points. So yeah, I guess that makes sense considering he's won back-to-back Norrises. Should have probably thought of that. Nashville, who do I think? Maybe Jason Arnott? Yep, Jason Arnott, 287 points. Season-wise, Pavelski in games played. And Dan Ellis had more saves in a game than Pecorine did with 45. New Jersey, Martin Brodeur with 43 saves. Not a surprise on that front at all. And career-wise, I guess Eliash. Yep, Patrick Eliash, 317. Very similar to probably what their real record book is like. The New York Islanders, this one I wouldn't know probably because they've changed their team up so much. I'm going to go with not John Tavares. Maybe Mark Streit. Marian Hossa, their free agent signing. Okay, that's interesting. 275 points. Probably could have guessed him, but didn't think of him still as an Islander because it's a little bit weird. And Jan Denis, most saves in a game with 45. Okay. New York Rangers. Who do I think for the Rangers? Maybe Dubinsky? I don't really know. There's probably somebody way better than that. Khudobin had the most saves in a game over Lundqvist with 48. What else we got here? Scott Gomez, 305. That's reasonable, I guess. Even though Gomez was kind of a mid player at this point. Ottawa, I should have guessed already, but I knew it was probably going to be Alfie anyways. 359 points. What else we got here? Most saves in a game. 54 saves from Jimmy Howard. Jeez. Some of these goalies have made some crazy amount of saves in games. 54 is a lot. So there is that. Nick Foligno, though, the most points in a game is really weird. Philly, Martin Biron, 48 saves. And career-wise, I'm going to guess Daniel Briere. Jeff Carter. Never mind. 313. This is like the Jeff Carter and Mike Richards show, apparently. Okay. What about Phoenix? Shane Doan. Yeah, that was an easy one. 282 points. We'll skim through all this stuff. And game records, Alex Auld had a 45 save performance. We head to Pittsburgh. I would guess Crosby. Fleury only made 43 saves in a game. It's got to be Crosby or Malkin. It's probably Crosby, though. Yep, Crosby. 383 points for him. Malkin, no in games played, and Malkin in goals. So Sid's mostly assisting on plays, apparently. We head to the San Jose Sharks. Yeah, I was going to guess that. Joe Thornton, easily 308 points. So there is that. Game records. Nabokov with 44 saves back in year 1. St. Louis. This is a weird one. I don't think I could guess on this front. Chris Mason, 47 saves. And it's going to be David Backes with 276. Okay. Tampa Bay. We don't want to do Tampa yet. We'll do Tampa last since it's our own team. And we'll do it a little bit more in depth-wise. Toronto, Matt Stajan. I would not have guessed that. Not in a big... out of every single player, I would never have gotten him. Never. Hebby Wilton, most saves in the game. Not really surprised considering he backstopped him to a cup. Vancouver, Jess Giguère with 51 saves. This has to be one of the Sedin brothers, but which one? I'm going to say Daniel. Yes, Daniel, 327. But Henrik Sedin probably very close to him in points. I actually should compare the two and see who is better of the two, because I feel like their points are very similar. Daniel is just 1 point under point per game, so that's kind of neat. And Washington, before we look at our own record book. Yep, Ovechkin, 396 points. Absolutely cruising. Not a surprise. Not a surprise at all. And game records, Kari Lettinen with a 45 save performance. Okay, what about our own records? This is where it's going to be interesting. So, Vinny Lecavalier, most points. Not a surprise, because he was really good for us over these 4 years. Most assists in your career, Vakov Prospal. Pretty good. Games played, Prospal as well. Penalty minutes, Steve Downey with 504, not a surprise. He's been kind of our goon. And then shutouts, Halak. And wins is Halak. All-time wise, though, it's Mike Smith by only a little bit. And in goals, it's Lecavalier. Season record-wise, most shutouts in a season was Halak. Most penalty minutes in a season was Artukin in year 1, I think it was, with 163. Most goals in a season, Lecavalier 53, and points was 97 by Lecavalier. And then we also have most assists in a season, Prospal with 65 assists, and Halakin wins with 33. Rookie record-wise, Meszaros, not that this really matters because you don't actually technically have Meszaros as a rookie in year 1. Ola Turnstrom technically would have been the rookie guy only because he was the only one we drafted that got into our lineup. And game record-wise, we see Mike Smith had the most saves in the game with 46. Meszaros had the most points in the game with 5. And Prospal was the only guy to have a hat-trick, it seems like, on our team. So there is that. Let's take a look at NHL records. I don't think anything's been adjusted yet because all these guys would never came close in these point totals. So this should probably be all the same still, my guess. Unless there's any season records that have been broken, which I don't think there was. Yeah, there was none. These are all the real players. Rookie record-wise, was there anything broken? It says Alex Ovechkin with 49, but he wasn't even a rookie this year technically, but the game says he was a rookie. So this part's just going to be kind of broken. So there is all of that. Okay. I did want to take a look at the Sedin brother thing. I know it's kind of a weird thing to take a look at, but I am curious if they had like similar point totals, because if they assist on each other's goals a lot, that'd be kind of neat. So we know that Daniel is right around point per game. 327 points, 328 games. What about Henrik? 323, 328. Yeah, that makes sense. These guys will definitely assist you on each other's points a lot. So that's kind of neat. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this final episode of our Tampa Bay Lightning Throwback 2009 franchise mode. So like I said, if there's anything that I didn't get to in this video that you guys want me to take a look at, I could maybe put some screenshots up on the community tab or on like Twitter if you want to. You could like ask me for that type of stuff and I'll provide it if needed. And yeah, I had a lot of fun with this short series. I know it kind of didn't last super long, but like I said, with NHL 24 coming out soon, I will be doing probably a full 99-2000 roster build franchise mode at some point in the lifespan of 24, just because I definitely want to go all 25 seasons with a roster build at some point, and I think that will be the perfect one to do it in. So anything down below, and I'll see you guys next time.